potential of walking with you through these great passages. And you will have to admit we've seen some phenomenal passages on these pages. Matthew has been inspired by God and has written some phenomenal truth to us, and we have been saturating in it, and God has been revealing it to us. And there has been the interaction between the living Word and the written Word, and we've been right in the middle of it, and God has been speaking to our hearts and calling us to something deeper than what we've ever known before. And that has been happening in my own life, and I'm grateful for that, because I want to expand in His truth. I want to know what He has to say. I want to be all He wants to be in me. I want the total flow. I want to be sourced by Him and Him alone. I've discovered that is the essential quality that must take place. That the issue of Christianity is not right and wrong, good and bad. It's not what you did or what you didn't do. Was it sourced by God? Is it spilling from Him and Him alone? Are you responding to the divine activity of God? Do you know what it is to live in the flow of who He is until out of you He is literally manifesting Himself, and you are finding Him demonstrating His life in and through you, and your world is being impacted because, hey, He is living His life upon the stage of your life. Oh, to be a vessel through which He can move. Oh, to be an earthen vessel that possesses the treasure, that the knowledge may be of God and not of us. That the evidence may be of Him and not of us. That He may be praised and we would not be praised. Oh, it's the issue of Christianity. And of course it's what the cross style is all about. I can't tell you how significant the cross style is. And I hope you've been picking up on the fact that over and over and over and over again He's bringing us back to this one single issue. That Jesus will not let His disciples get sidetracked from this one. Hey, He's going to keep their nose to the grindstone. He's going to keep bringing them back to this one fundamental truth above all truths. They have to deal with this. He will not let them off the hook. This was not one sermon in the midst of 6 messages during a revival meeting, and one of them happened to be on this subject. They didn't deal with that. Doesn't matter anyhow. We got some other subjects to deal with. Oh, there's tithing to deal with. There's going to church attendance to deal with. Call to preach to deal with. Hey, we don't have to deal with this other. It's not the way it is. This is not one issue among many. This is the issue. This is the line. This is the filter. This is the thread that runs through every single issue that you come to grips with in Christianity. Hey, will you die? Hey, will you throw your life away? Will you give yourself up? Will you yield to Him and Him alone? Will you let Him be Lord of your life? Will you allow the cross and its style to literally live through you? Will you lose your life to Him? See, it doesn't matter what issue you bring up, it's going to come back to this one single idea. Will you die on the cross? Will you let Him live through you? Will you let Him source you? Will you let Him be the very instigator of life itself? Will you find Him and Him alone? Will you get so captured by Him that your eyesight is filled with Him and Him alone, that you have a single eye and you cannot see anything else? Will that take place in your life? Hey, it's the very thrust of all there is in Christianity. And again, He's calling us to that. Doesn't matter where you go in the pages from here on out in the book of Matthew, you're going to come back to this one single factor. Every paragraph has to be interpreted in light of the cross and its style. For He will not let them get off of this subject. Now that's true in the passage we're dealing with now. It's Matthew chapter 17, verse 14, down through verse 21. There is no other issue here except the issue of the style of the cross. He injects some new language for us that we'd not dealt with in chapter 16 or 17 until this point. It's the language of faith. But we've discovered all over again that faith is all about cross style. Doesn't matter what you want to call it. Doesn't matter what language you want to use. It's going to come back to this idea of, will you die? Will you die to sourcing yourself, invoking your own activity? Will you die to that? Will you give up yourself until He alone is the source of your life and He is living His life through you? Will you lose your life for His sake? Will you allow Him to literally captivate you until, hey, He is the one single production in your life? You have nothing else going on but Him, and He is in the middle of everything. Will you bleed, suffer, and die? Will you give up the right to live your own life? Will you never ever think about yourself because He's the only one that's worth thinking about? Will you give yourself to Him? And so the whole idea of the cross style comes to play out in the terms of faith. The faith of invoking the activity of the second party until He is all the one, He is the only one you call upon. He is your single source of life. Everywhere you go in the Scriptures, you come back to it. So it's the fundamental, you understand? And we're finding that over and over again. And if I have been accused, of course, of preaching only one sermon, and in a sense that is right. Because, see, the Word of God only has one thing to say to us. And it doesn't matter which passage you go to, you're going to come back to the single subject of, hey, is He going to be the single source? Are you going to buy into the cross? Are you going to die to yourself? Are you going to lose your life? Are you going to allow Him to flow through you? Will you lose your life that He might live in and through you? It's the fundamental of the whole thing. Now, we've been seeing that forcibly in chapter 16 and chapter 17. And we've been moving especially into verse 14 of chapter 17 down through verse 20. And let's read it again. Oh, it's such valuable material. When they had come to the multitude, a man came to Him, kneeling down to Him, and saying, Lord, have mercy on my son, for he is moonstruck and suffers severely. For he often falls into the fire and often into the water. So I brought him to your disciples, but they could not cure him. Then Jesus answered and said, O faithless and perverse generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I bear with you? Bring him here to me. And Jesus rebuked the demon, and it came out of him, and the child was cured from that very hour. Then the disciples came to Jesus privately and said, Why could we not cast it out? So Jesus said to them, Because of your unbelief. For assuredly I say to you, if you have faith as a mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, Move from here to there, and it will move, and nothing will be impossible for you. Wow. Jesus, let your word speak to us today. What a powerful, powerful passage. We're really interested in zeroing in on verse 17. It's the words of Jesus, you notice. And it's the response that He has when He finds out that these disciples of His are unable to cast out the demon. And He gives a general statement. They certainly were included. But no doubt He had in mind the whole of Judaism. No doubt He had in mind the conflict that He had with the Pharisees. You realize within arm's length of this very scene, He's had conflict with the Pharisees. Oh, go back to chapter 16. Why don't you look at it? Verse 1. It's the Pharisees and the Sadducees. You know that they don't get along. Never have gotten along. Here they are linking arms together, coming to test Jesus. Can you believe it? Test Him and ask Him to show them a sign. So they're putting Him to the test, you know. It's again a part of the conflict. He knows what's going on. And they're wanting to know some kind of sign. Show us a sign, Jesus. Hey, do another magic trick, Jesus. Hey, pull off another deal, Jesus. Jesus nails them. See, they've already done that one other time. Matthew chapter 12, they tried to get a sign out of Him. Hey, Jesus, show us a sign. Jesus nailed them severely at that moment. He literally talked to them about Jonah, and He talked to them about the Jonah being in the belly of a fish, and how he literally was delivered by God. So shall the Son of Man be in the deep. So it was a parallel, and he brings them back to that. He says, I don't play that game. Hey, the idea of a sign, if I gave you a sign, you'd want another one. Sign seekers are never satisfied, you know that, because you always want something bigger and better. Maybe it was coincidence. Hey, how do we know? Hey, I had one lightning bolt the last time. Ought to have two this time. Come on, bring me three. How about four? Where do you end, man? Never ends, see? So the sign seeking is never a stimuli for faith. So I'm not going to play that game. I will go this far, however. We'll give you one sign. The only sign that there is. And in verse 4, he says, A wicked and adulterous generation seeks after a sign, and no sign shall be given to it except the sign of the prophet Jonah. So he brings up this whole subject of Jonah, which is really interesting. You will remember that also was back in Matthew 12, as we just mentioned. In fact, why don't you turn back there and we'll look at it, because it's important material for what's going on here. It's verse 38 of chapter 12. He's just given them this tremendous discourse on the unforgivable sin. Yeah, the blasphemy against the Holy Spirit. And how what's inside of a man comes out. Hey, not what goes in a man that defiles him, what comes out of him. And you can't, a good tree can't have bad fruit. A bad tree can't have good fruit. Why? Because it's what's inside of them that really matters. And so he brings that whole subject up. My, what a strong teaching that was. Then in verse 38, some of the scribes and the Pharisees answered, saying, Teacher, we want to see a sign from you. Isn't that amazing? Phenomenal truth that would knock your socks off. Phenomenal truth that nails you against the wall. Phenomenal truth that changes your life forever, that enlarges your thought process so big you think your brain's going to explode. And what do they want to know? Hey, show us a sign. That's what we really want. Duh. They didn't hear. They didn't listen. They didn't get it. It didn't come through for them. No question about that. So Jesus turns to them and he gives this discourse. Goes from verse 39 down through verse 45, and he really nails them. Again, look at verse 39. An evil and adulterous generation seeks after a sign, and no sign will be given to it except the sign of the prophet Jonah. Now go back to chapter 16. Hold that place in chapter 12. Go back to chapter 16, verse 4. A wicked and adulterous generation seeks after a sign, and no sign shall be given to it except the sign of the prophet Jonah. There it is again, see? Double statement. Answered him the same way. Wouldn't get off of it. See, they couldn't trick him. Now, look at the subject, look at the passage that we're dealing with in verse 17. And it's down in verse 17. Oh, faithless and perverse generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I bear with you? Bring him here to me. See, it no doubt has something of a parallel to this same kind of thing that he's saying to these scribes. A wicked and adulterous generation seeks after a sign. Verse 39 in chapter 12. An evil and adulterous generation seeks after a sign. And then, of course, this passage in verse 17. Oh, faithless and perverse generation, how long shall I be with you? See, no doubt that memory was lingering in his mind. So you see, he wasn't just talking to the disciples alone. No doubt there were others standing around. No doubt he was addressing them as well. This was like he was looking up into the sky, and he wasn't talking to anybody in particular. Wasn't looking anybody in the eye saying, I mean you. He was just kind of looking up in the sky and just kind of giving this general statement of, whoa, hey, oh perverse, faithless and perverse generation. How long shall I be with you? How long shall I bear with you? Hey, bring that kid over here. Oh, go back to chapter 12. An evil and adulterous generation seeks after a sign. No sign will be given to it except the sign of the prophet Jonah. Then in this chapter he begins to explain this Jonah thing. Verse 40, for as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of a great fish, so will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. I am obviously talking about his death, his crucifixion and his death, and then on into his resurrection. The men of Nineveh will rise up in the judgment with this generation and condemn it, because they repented at the preaching of Jonah, and indeed a greater than Jonah is here. Talking about himself. Hey, when Jonah preached, man, they repented. Nineveh, those boys repented in repentance. Hey, I've come, a greater than Jonah, and have preached to you, and you won't even come close to repentance. You come seeking after a sign. Do another magic trick. Verse 42, he goes on, the queen of the south will rise up in judgment with this generation and condemn it. For she came from the ends of the earth to hear the wisdom of Solomon, and indeed a greater than Solomon is here. Phenomenal statement. Hey, Queen of Sheba came seeking wisdom from Solomon. Hey, you guys have been right here on the scene. You've heard a greater wisdom than that which came from Solomon. You've heard the voice of the Son of God himself, bringing you the wisdom of God himself, man. And you wouldn't listen. You wouldn't listen. You went on in your own thought process. You went on. And so he goes on giving this discourse, saying to them, hey, you are a wicked generation seeking after a sign. And the whole business of Jonah, you understand, this sign of Jonah is all about the sign of the cross. In other words, he's saying, I'm not going to get off of this subject. I'm not going any place here but the cross, man. This is all I'm going to talk about to the disciples, to you boys, whoever, whenever, whatever. I'm rich young ruler. I'm coming back to this. This is the business of bleed, suffer, and die. So even this sign seeking is brought under the auspices, the domination of the cross and its style. And then of course you come to this chapter 16, and here they are seeking after a sign again, and he nails them again. He nails them and talks to them in terms of a wicked and adulterous generation seeks after a sign, and no sign will be given to it except the sign of the prophet Jonah. Hey, I already told you about this once, not going to tell you again. Hey, Jonah, all about the sign of the cross. All about bleed, suffer, and die. Come on, guys. Hey, get with the program. It's all about pour your life out. Give yourself out. Never, ever live for yourself. Hey, this is the deal. Now, after all of that, he's come to talk to his disciples about it. But see, they no more buy into this than the Pharisees and the scribes who were sign-seeking. Hey, they didn't buy into this. We don't want a bleeding, suffering, dying Messiah. So he comes to chapter 17. After explaining it all to him in chapter 16, he comes to chapter 17, and the whole chapter, again, is about the confirmation of it. He indeed is telling you the truth. Listen, this is the way it's going down. Hey, man, here's how it's really happening. I'm telling you, son, this is the essence of the truth. I'm a bleeding, suffering, dying Messiah. If you're going to be my disciple, I'm calling you to be a bleeding, suffering, dying disciple. Will you lose your life? Will you give yourself up? How disappointing it must have been to him. Oh, probably he already knew it. Wow. He knew they'd rebuked him. He knew they'd shut him down. He knew they didn't buy into the cross style. So, hey, he knew that they were going to be unable in ministry. That's why it worried him so bad. Now he's come down the mountain after this Mount of Transfiguration, and Moses and Elijah and all of this that he's experienced and all the things that confirmed it that are in connection with that. Look at this, man. He comes down from the mountain. And in verse 14, there's a father, comes running up, wringing his hands, saying, oh, Jesus, Jesus, I'm so glad you're here. Man, I came to your disciples with my boy. Hey, he's moonstruck. He suffers severely. He often falls into the fire and often into the water. I brought him to your disciples, and they thought they could do something for him, but hey, they were helpless, man. They were helpless. Jesus just shakes his head, no doubt, looks out and says, oh, faithless, verse 17, oh, faithless and perverse generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I bear with you? What's he saying to them? Well, we've been working on an outline. Well, let me share that outline with you again. Faith is the point. Faith is the point. It's the whole subject of the passage, of course. Interesting here, verse 17. He starts out, oh, faithless, which is the lack of faith, obviously. So everything in the passage revolves around the idea of faith, which of course is all seen through the eyes of the style of the cross. For faith is invoking the activity of the second party, dying to yourself, lose your life, give yourself up, till he's the only source. So you see, this whole idea of faith comes right back to the subject we're talking about. So faith is the point. We of course looked at the idea under that. Number one, defined obligation. That we have one single obligation, and that is to invoke his activity. That's the definition of faith, invoking the activity of the second party. I can't, you can, I will let you. I'm not adequate, you are. Take over. Hey, I can't pull this off. You can. I give you the chance. So it's constantly calling upon him that he might act in your behalf, move through you, do what you can't possibly do. Oh, that's faith. Oh, to live that way. To live that way. A constant living of being sourced by him. Can you imagine having the fullness of God indwelt within you and literally moving through you, permeating your whole life, mind, body, and spirit, until your whole life is generated by him. Every attitude comes from him. Every movement of your being comes from him. You're living in the flow of him, and you're constantly invoking his activity. See, too often we keep God back on a shelf. We want Him in our lives, but back there, in the religious section, hey, He's not really involved in this. We divide Him up. You can't do that, man. This is Jesus who breaks out of the compartments, breaks out of the little boxes we put Him in, and literally permeates. He's like leaven. He permeates the whole meal. It's the kingdom of God kind of thing, He said in a parable. So you see that Jesus can't be isolated into a little segment of our lives or a little timing of our being or locked in our little prayer closet, man, where we come and get Him and let Him out and then run Him back in. Hey, He's the Jesus who wants to live in the hand, the Jesus who wants to flow in the mind, be in the eyes, be in the tongue, flow through the total being. It's the Jesus who wants to constantly source every activity in our lives. Tell me the activity He shouldn't be involved in. Tell me the movement that He shouldn't be involved in. Tell me where you're going to go that He shouldn't be right in the middle of going there with you. Tell me the trial that you shouldn't drag Him in the middle of. Tell me what the thought process is, what's going on in your mind that He shouldn't think. Hey, bring it all in, man. See, this is not get rid of anything. This is get Jesus in the middle of everything. This is Jesus take over. This is Jesus I can't control my mind. You get in the middle of my mind and every thought process. And I bring every thought of my mind under the domination of the supremacy of Christ who reigns supreme within the mind. Jesus, I'm not adequate to pull off anything in terms of proper action. So Jesus, get in the middle of every action. For I give you the right to permeate every action and be the source of that action. Jesus, I'm not adequate to witness. You witness through me. See, that's the faith He's talking about. And it's Jesus, Jesus, and more Jesus. Oh, Jesus saturating our lives. Jesus living in and through us. Man, can you imagine the life that constantly practices His presence, constantly feeds on Him, constantly knows nothing but His resource, constantly knows the flow of His Spirit, constantly is generated by Him, constantly experiences the life of His being. Whoa, that would be abundance of living. That would be a living beyond. That would be acting like you can't act and being what you can't be and living like you can't live and thinking what you can't think and doing what you can't do and all the time wondering how you're doing it and knowing it's not you, it's Him, for you're invoking the activity of the second party. So it's defined obligation. So faith is the point, defined obligation, and then direct object, which we've already talked about. But then how could you not talk about it? For the object of faith is the issue. It's always the issue. It's not faith or amount of faith or how much faith you got. Talks about faith the size of a mustard seed, which is so small if you had any less than that you wouldn't have any at all. So, do you see that He's talking about not amount of faith, not you need more faith, increase your faith. That's not the deal, man. Faith is all about, hey, if you got any at all, doesn't matter how much you got, if you got any at all, you're in. It all matters about where you're going to place your faith. Will you have the direct object of your faith to be Jesus and Jesus alone? In other words, will you invoke the activity of this Christ and this Christ alone? Will you not mix it? Will you not add anything to it? Will it be 100%, absolutely, totally, nothing else but the person of Jesus Christ? Will you not inject your little deal? Well, I'll have my input. Well, I'll add to. Well, I'll bring a contribution to. Well, it'll be mostly Jesus, but I want to bring this. No, it's Him and Him alone. All the eggs in one single basket. Only one thing sourcing your life. Only one thing bringing things to pass. Only one thing producing you. Him and Him alone. Invoking the activity of the second party. Defined obligation, direct object. Now we want to talk about a second thing. Faith is the point. Oh, faith is the plight. You see it in verse 17. Hey, we want to deal with it. He starts out by saying, oh, faithless and perverse generation. Faithless and perverse generation. What a statement. You are a faithless generation. No doubt He's talking to His disciples because, hey, He's going to come when they come to Him in private and say, oh, why couldn't we? He's going to say, you are faithless. Your unbelief. You're faithless. Now, faithless doesn't mean you don't have any faith. That is, faithless doesn't, the emphasis of faithless is not on amount of faith. So you don't look at that and say, well, what he's saying is they don't have enough faith. No, the issue of this is your faith is in the wrong object, is on the wrong object. So what he's saying when he says faithless is, he's saying, hey, you got your faith on the wrong object. It isn't that they don't have faith. They do have faith. They have faith in the wrong thing. So they're faithless, meaning you don't have faith in God. See, you're not trusting me. See, you shut me down. I tried to talk to you and give you new insight, expand your life, pull you into a whole new dream and vision. And what'd you do? Shut me down, man. You didn't believe me. So you didn't have faith. You're faithless. You didn't have faith in me. So when we don't have faith in Christ, we are faithless. So he calls them a faithless and perverse generation. Oh, generation, faithless generation. You're the generation that has faith in everything but me. Faithless generation. You're the one that trusts everything except trusting me. You trust yourselves. You trust your economy. You trust your nation. You trust your church. You trust your religion. You trust what you can do. You trust your discipline. You trust yourself. You trust everything but me. So you are a faithless generation. See, that's about the object of faith. So we're talking about number two. Number one, faith is the point. Number two, faithless is the plight. Now under that, we want to talk about three things. Number one, it's evidenced by their lack. That is, the fact that they're not trusting Him, the fact that they are a faithless generation, the fact that they have put their faith in the wrong object. It's evidence by their lack. Who could dispute it? See, everybody recognizes it. For instance, look at verse 16. The father of the child, he recognizes it. Hey, there is a lack. They didn't cast the demon out, man. Ministry is shut down. So it's obvious you didn't have any faith. Hey, that is your faith was in the wrong object. Why? Because hey, you didn't produce. Ministry didn't happen. The flow of the Spirit didn't take place, man. There was no ministry happening. Therefore, you had faith in the wrong object. And the evidence of that is in the lack of ministry. Again, the Father recognized that. Look in verse 16. He turns to Jesus and says, so I brought him to your disciples, but they could not. They could not. They could not cure him. Hey, they were helpless. Just couldn't pull it off. And why was that? Faithless generation. Had your faith in the wrong object. So, hey, even the Father had sense enough to know this. Oh, it's evidenced by their lack. Not only did the Father know that, but go down to verse 19. The disciples themselves knew that. See, isn't it interesting? They had to admit that. They came to Jesus privately. Well, you can understand that. Could we see you in your office? Privately, we want to talk to you alone. Privately, they came to Jesus privately and said, why couldn't we cast it out? Jesus, we're absolutely puzzled. Why couldn't we cast this demon out? We couldn't pull it off. What happened to us? Hey, faithless generation, got your faith in the wrong objects, evidenced by your lack. Hey, couldn't pull it off. Hey, didn't get the results in your life. Hey, weren't able to master it. Come on. Hey, faithless generation, had your faith in the wrong object. So it's evidenced by your lack. See, the Father recognized it. The disciples themselves recognized it. Now, really got to be careful here. Don't want you to go away with the wrong impression of what the Scriptures is saying. Want to qualify. See, the evidence by their lack is not, oh, they lack success in ministry. So if you have faith, you're always going to have success in ministry. Now, that isn't true. That definitely is not true. Well, yeah, if you have faith, you'll always be successful in ministry. That's not true. Because that's measuring faith in terms of physical results. How many healings did you do? How many miracles did you pull off? What were the kind of results? How many conversions did you have? How big is your church? How fast are you growing? And those who have lots of faith grow big. Those who don't have much faith don't grow. See, that's no. Hey, that's clear off base. Hey, you'll fall into a trap on that one, man, and swallow yourself. So don't get into that. So it isn't lack of results. You remember Jesus, for instance. Jesus came to Nazareth, and the Scripture distinctly says in Matthew that He could do no mighty works there because of their unbelief. Well, if Jesus had just believed, He could have changed that. No, Jesus didn't lack faith. Jesus had all the faith in the world, man. He was constantly invoking the activity of the second party. He never was off on that. He never failed to do that. He was constantly living in the flow of His Father. He was always living in the flow of His Father. Every time He lived in the flow of His Father. When He was successful, He lived in the flow of His Father. When He wasn't successful, He lived in the flow of His Father. Because success, measuring it in terms of ministry and miracles, is not the measuring stick. So it isn't that they lacked, and therefore, because they lacked in successive ministry events, they did not have faith. Jesus couldn't cast any demons out. He couldn't do any mighty works in Nazareth. But it wasn't because He lacked faith. He was invoking the activity of the second party, so it wasn't on His behalf. So you see, there's more to this than just saying, hey, if you have faith and invoke the activity of the second party, you'll have phenomenal ministry results. That's not true. Because a person can come and be a great success with nothing more than charismatic personalities, man. Hey, you can build a church on a charismatic personality, and Jesus doesn't have anything to do with it. See, the idea is not getting bodies in the building, even creating miracles. Hey, there can be reports of great miracles and not have God on the scene at all. The devil himself can duplicate the miracle business. So don't fall in that trap, man. Don't even go there. So what we're talking about when we say, oh, faithless generation. What is a faithless generation? One who has the object of their faith in the wrong place. The object of their faith is not Christ. So they have their faith placed upon the wrong object. It's evidenced by their lack. Hey, the Father recognized it. The disciples recognized it. But it wasn't lack of success. It wasn't lack of casting out the demon. That wasn't the issue. The issue, there was no flow, man. There was no flow. They lacked the flow of the resource of God. Hey, there was nothing happening in and through them. Hey, He was not moving through them. Hey, they were not being the product of the Spirit of God. See, whenever you are the product of the Spirit of God, you are successful regardless of how many people kneel at an altar of prayer, how many people pat you on the back, how many miracles are done. Regardless of all of that, man, you are successful, because the test is, hey, invoking His activity. And when His activity is moving and He is producing, man, you are successful. And it has nothing to do with the result. Now, we believe results will take place. Yes, the demon would have been cast out if the Spirit had been flowing. But it wasn't the demon being cast out. It was the Spirit flowing. It was the invoking the activity of the second party that brought the success. And that is always the test. So walk away from every single scene. Say, oh God, did You flow? Were You flowing through my being? Was I invoking the activity of your being? Were You allowed to flow in? And were You allowed to source? And were You allowed to stimulate? Were You the motivation? Were You the very power of my life? That is the test. Results, not the test. This is the test. Is He flowing through you? Did you invoke the activity of the second party? Jesus Himself. When you invoke the activity of the second party, doesn't matter what happens out there, man. You are successful. Walk away with your head high and your shoulders straight, knowing God has done what was required. Because, hey, that is the issue. So it was evident by their lack. They lacked the flow of the Spirit. Hey, they did not invoke the activity of the second party. Therefore, they were a faithless generation. Oh, faithless generation, He says. It was not only evidenced by their lack, it was caused by their past. Now, this is really a crucial issue. It was caused by their past. Again, you see this in verse 17. No doubt you caught this in your saturation. Oh, faithless and perverse generation, He says. Another translation of that would go like this. Oh, two-faced and twisted generation. Now the grammar of that, oh, faithless and twisted generation, the grammar of that indicates that there is something that has happened to them in the past. Now you got to get this. This is really important. There was something that happened according to this passage. There's something that happened to them in the past. There is a perversion that has come to them in the past which has left them a victim and in a distorted position in the present. Get it? Hey, there's something that happened to them in the past that has left them in the present in this distorted and twisted position. So he's calling them a two-faced and twisted generation. Because there's something that was in the past that has happened to them. It's a perversion. It was a twist. It was an evil. It was a wrong in the past, which has left them the victim of that perversion. And so they are a victim of the perversion, and that has left them in a distorted position. Let's go over it again. Hey, Jesus is calling them a faithless and perverse generation, which literally means, oh, two-faced and twisted generation. And what he's indicating by that is that there is a perversion that has happened to them in the past, a past perversion, which literally has left them a victim to that perversion and in a distorted and twisted position. Now, let's bring that down to practicality. What does that really mean? They've been taught something in the past. Something in the past has been strongly emphasized and has been strongly brought to their attention, and they have been drilled in it over and over and over again. They've been taught something in the past. They believed it. They were taught it. They've believed it. They believed it then. They believe it now. It's wrong, but they believe it. But they believe it to be the truth. See, if they had any idea it was wrong, they would drop it. But they believe it's the truth. So there is a perversion. There's a twisting of the truth that they've been taught in the past. Hey, they've swallowed it hook, line, and sinker. After all, how could they not? So they've swallowed it hook, line, and sinker. They believe it's the truth. They've latched onto it. They're hanging on to it. They cling to it. They believe it's the truth, and they hang on to it as if it is the truth. So when anything in the present comes to them that contradicts that wrong that they think is the truth, they refuse it. Why? Because they think they know the truth. But it's really wrong. It's a perversion, and it's from their past. Whew. Drag that one into the middle of your life, brother. Hey, think that one through and see what happens to you. Here's something that I've been taught in the past. Yeah, I've been taught it strongly in the past. I know. It's come to me so forcibly. It's been drilled into me. I believe it to be the truth, so I hang on to it. Now here I am in the present. I'm in a twisted and distorted position because I believe something to be the truth, which is really not truth. It's untruth. It's wrong. But I hang on to it. And every time God brings truth to my life, I refuse that truth. I reject that truth. Why? Because I think what I have is the truth, when all the time it's a perversion. It's not the truth. And I'm in this twisted position, and even the truth of God can't get through to me. Do you see how crucial that is? Hey, that's a perfect picture of what Jesus is describing in terms of the scribes and the Pharisees and the generation of Judaism that he was a part of. He has called them what? Oh, faithless and perverse generation. Hey, you're twisted, man. You've been taught something in the past, and you've been taught it so strongly, and you've leaned on it so forcibly, and you've believed it so strongly that you believe it to be the truth. It's wrong, but you believe it to be the truth. Here you are. God has sent you in the present amazing truth. He sent you the Son of God himself. He sent you the Messiah to tell you the truth. Sermon on the Mount has been given. Parable after parable has been given. Man, the truth has been laid out for you time after time after time after time. But you hang on to this untruth as if it's true, and you reject everything I say to you. You won't buy into it. You push it aside. Why? Because you think you have the truth, but what you have is not the truth. It's a perversion from your past. You've been taught wrong, man. So you're in this distorted position, and even truth can't reach you. Let's get down to practical case. For instance, the disciples had been taught, hey, their whole generation had been taught what? The Messiah was going to be a military kind of Messiah. He was going to come in, march in bold terms, riding on a white steed. Hey, he was going to fight their wars for them. He was going to go down to Rome, set up a throne, kick Caesar off the throne, set up his own throne. Hey, his disciples were going to rule with him. It was really going to be great. Hey, this was the Messiah. He was going to correct everything, social reform, set up the kingdom. It would be a restoration of the old Solomon days. Yeah, pomp and glory. Hey, all the nations of the world were scared to death of Israel. Why? Because they were so powerful. They were so, there was the God of Israel, and they were so wise, and Solomon and all of that, man, and all of their wealth and all their prosperity, and the nations of the earth were scared to death of Israel. And they wanted that again. So they thought the Messiah was going to restore that. He was going to come, bring Israel back into her rightful position in the world, in her world rulership, and they were going to be, wow, the people of God again, and everybody was going to bow at their feet and worship, and hey, they were going to kind of run the world. It was really going to be great. So that's what they had been taught. The Messiah was going to be a military Messiah. He was going to come marching in and set that whole thing up. The disciples were constantly looking for Jesus to pull that off. Hey, when are you going to do it, Jesus? That's why here in this chapter we studied in verse 10. We have this question. Hey, why? Yeah, why? We know you're the Messiah, but we've been taught by the scribes that Elijah must come first. So when's he coming, man? Hey, we got the idea that you're the Messiah. We believe that. But you're just treading water, waiting for the forerunner to do his thing so you can march in and do your thing. So we're waiting for you to march down to Rome. Realize you haven't done it because you're waiting on the forerunner. So you're just kind of treading water. So when's Elijah going to get on with it so we can march down there to Rome? You can be the big shot you came to be. Hey, bleeding, suffering, and dying isn't even in their picture, isn't in their mind at all, man. See, they've been taught this perversion. They've been taught this untruth. But they've been taught it so forcibly that they have believed it. And they have believed it as truth. So here they are now. Here's the Messiah. They believe he is. They've given their life to Christ, but hey, he keeps giving them this truth, bombarding their brain with what? Oh, bleed, suffer, and die. Take up your cross. Come on, guys. Follow me. Deny yourself. Hey, lose your life. We're going to go shed our blood. And they look at what they've always been taught, which is wrong, but they believe it's true, and they reject what he's saying. They rebuke him. They put him in his place. They say, hey, Jesus, we're not going to listen to that. No, you're not going to be that. They shut him down. Ministry shuts down. They're nowhere. Why? Because they are a faithless and perverse generation. They have something they've been taught in the past that they're holding on to as truth, and even the present truth that Jesus has given them cannot seem to change that. They will not budge. What do you want to do with that? Drag that into the middle of your life. What have you been taught, man? Hey, what have you latched onto? Hey, what have you taken as truth and said, this is the truth, I hang on to this? And lo and behold, Jesus is trying to give you new truth, trying to expand you, but hey, you hold on to that which is not even true, may not be wrong, but it isn't even true, may not be evil, but it isn't even true, and the truth can't get through to you. Why? You're holding on to this. So you are a faithless and perverse generation. You have put your faith in the wrong object. So what's he calling you to do, man? Bleed, suffer, and die. Come on. Pour your life out. Take your tradition. Bring it under the blood of the cross. Come on. Take all that you've been taught. Bring it under the blood of the cross. Hey, man, be cleansed anew and afresh. Let the very essence of Christ, put your faith in him and him alone. Listen to him, not what you've always been taught. Listen to him alone, not all your doctrine. See, listen to him and him alone. Get all wrapped up in him, man. Let him expand you. Let him build you. Let him grow you. Come on. Oh, faithless and perverse generation. No wonder he says, how long shall I be with you? How long am I going to have to put up with this? How How long am I going to have to beat you over the head with truth, and yet you won't budge because you're taking something you've been taught in the past and you're hanging on to it as if it is true. Come on, shake loose, guy. Come on to the cross. Get under the blood of the cross. Come on, lose your life. Die to yourself. Spill your life out. Quit thinking about yourself. Quit thinking out of your own little mind deal. Come on, invoke the activity of the second party. Give yourself up. So he's calling them back, you see. Oh, faithless and perverse generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I bear with you? How long am I going to have to bombard you with this truth? They are literally faithless is the plight. So we're talking about faith is the point, faithless is the plight. Now, as we're talking about faithless, we're again not talking about amount of faith. We're talking about faith in the wrong object. Hey, it's not an issue of how much faith or do you have any faith. It's faith in you got faith. It's faith in the wrong object. You're a faithless is the plight. It's evidenced by their lack. Hey, there was the lack of the flow of the movement of God, man. They shut him down, so it wasn't happening anymore. It was caused by their past. Oh, two-faced and twisted generation. You have a truth, you have what you've been taught in the past, which is untruth. You hold on to it as if it is truth, so in the present, when truth comes to you, hey, it doesn't get through to you. You're going to have to dump that man, and you are going to have to put your faith, invoke the activity of him and him alone. So we're back to the same dynamic truth that he's been trying to tell them all along in terms of the style of the cross. But I want to give you one more thing. It's evidenced by they're a faithless generation. Faithless is the plight. It's evidenced by their lack. It's caused by their past. It's rebuked by their Christ. Oh, listen to the rebuke. Again, verse 17. Oh, faithless and perverse generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I bear with you? Wow. Those are strong words. You want Jesus to look you in the face and say that? Not me, man. Not me. Oh, Jesus, don't let me ever get in the place. Hey, were they bad people? No. 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 Hey, weren't they in ministry? Yes, yes, yes. Hey, weren't they followers of Christ? Sure, sure. Didn't they go to church every Sunday? Yes. Didn't they tithe their money? Yes. Yes, they did. See, they did all the right stuff, but what's happened? What's happened? Jesus is turning to them in this strong, strong rebuke. And there is a divine impact that's taking place. Oh God, shake me loose from everything in the past that I've ever been taught until I hear your voice clearly. And the only thing that comes true, the only thing that is true in my life is what you have to say. Jesus, bring me back to a clarity of spirit to be able to understand and to grasp your voice and your voice alone. I invoke your activity and your activity only. I don't invoke the activity of past theology. I invoke the activity of your presence in my life. Here I am, Jesus, here I am. I will live out of you, sourced by you and you alone. That is my prayer, man. That is my prayer. You remember that there are bold statements in the Word of God about faith. Statements like this: whatsoever is not of faith is sin. Whew. Whatsoever is not of faith is sin. What's he saying? Oh, that's a bold statement, man. Whatever is not sourced by faith. Now, what's faith? Invoking the activity of the second party. So do you realize that anything that is not sourced by him is sin? So everything that's sourced out of me or goodness or my own righteousness or my past, and it's not sourced by him, it is sin, man. So this doesn't have anything to do with good and bad, right and wrong. See, it may look good, it may smell good, it may be religious, you may think it helps the church, it may be bring hundreds of people into the church, but hey, if it's not of him, it is sin. So you see, this really becomes a strong issue. Oh, you remember that in Hebrews it says, for without faith it is impossible to please God. Without faith. What's faith? Invoking the activity of the second party. Hey, if the only way you can please God is to have His activity, invoking His activity. Oh, calling upon Him. See, what you do for Him does not please Him. Hey, He is not in this for you to work hard for Him. He's in this that He might dynamically take you and work through you. So everything you do, everything that's sourced in you, produces sin. Hey, it's unpleasing to Him. He is not pleased with it. So He is calling you. He is calling you to the depth of faith, invoking His activity and His activity alone. So we're back to this fundamental definition. It is invoking the activity of the second party. Oh, Jesus, move through me. Hey, I bring myself. I do not want to be a part of the faithless and perverse generation. I come to you for you to literally be the only source in my life. Source me, Jesus, by the power of yourself.